Hey there, this is AK Blake with the Summit Realty Group. Today I wanted to take a little time and talk about cash flow versus appreciation when you're buying investment property. So before we get into that topic though, I want to talk about the four money makers of real estate. I've brought this up before and I'm sure I will bring it up over and over again. It's a very basic knowledge that you need to have to kind of form all your opinions and your plan for how you're going to invest. So the number one way you make money that most people are thinking of is cash flow. And that's when you have rents coming in that are hopefully exceeding the expenses of the property and you're in the cash flow positive. The second is the amortization of the loan. Amortization, if you don't know, means paying down your loan and gaining more equity in the house. So let's say all else is the same, no appreciation happens on the house, and you had $100,000 of debt, you slowly paid that $100,000 of debt down, you would gain equity if the house stayed stagnant. Which leads into the next one. Houses don't stay stagnant generally. There is appreciation. So appreciation is when your house gains value, the market goes up. Again, that's equity. That is now money in your pocket. Not really in your pocket. You do have to get it through a refinance or selling it, but it's still money that you have. And then the last method is your taxes. Usually there's some kind of tax break for owning real estate. To be honest, this is kind of one of my weak spots. I don't talk about much because I don't know too much about it, but it is very beneficial for the more income you make and the more real estate you invest in. So those are the four money makers. Today I want to concentrate on the cash flow and appreciation because they have a pretty cool relationship with each other. Not that they're more important than the other two, but they're very specific to a lot of the questions I get on how to invest. So appreciation and cash flow have kind of a tangled love story. They're related, but I would say they are inversely related. And I'm going to speak in generalities because every property is specific and different. You can get a great deal on a house and it makes a whole bunch of difference. But if you have a property that's cash flowing really high and doing really great on that end, it's usually going to appreciate slower. If you have a property that is appreciating really quickly in a great market, usually the cash flow is going to be lower. Now, why is that? What I always bring it back to is the desirability. And there can be a lot of causes for this, of course, but something that is in a very desirable area, a great city that has a lot of people moving into it, everybody wants to be there. Obviously, you can see why appreciation would be going up quickly, because if the housing inventory cannot grow with the population growth and the demand, supply and demand, those prices are going to go up and things are going to appreciate more quickly than say like a rural area that nobody's moving into or people even moving out of. So let's say you have that high appreciation, you're going to pay more for that house, and a lot of times rents or the way that you're making your cash flow don't always keep up with the scaling appreciation. And again, this is general. So you'll have a lower cash flow. Some people, even investors, are looking to just break even or just make a little bit of money, but be in the high appreciation arena. Now, the other side, like I said, let's go to kind of a rural area where maybe the appreciation is flat, steady, or very, very slow. A lot of times the cash flow can be very high just because the rents have caught up and everything is in a better position, so you can have a better cash flow. Or we can even go to the further end of the spectrum. If you get in a really bad area that people don't really want to live in, again, that's obviously not great for your rental rates, but usually you can get such a great deal on the property, you can cash flow with it pretty well. Now, that does not bring in all the other issues of like quality of the tenant you're going to have, and just things like that, and general repair on the house and whatnot. So I'm not saying you should go that way, or one way or the other, really. So to give an example of a high cash flowing property, I actually want to talk about my grandparents. They own a mobile home park, and when my grandpa was alive, he would say, that is my ATM machine. And because of cash flow, it's a stinking great for him, basically, is what he was saying. Every month, he'd take money out of it. But there's something that I noticed is every few months, somebody would come by and want to buy the mobile home park, which to me, this was before I was really in real estate. I was like, who would want to own a mobile home park? It wasn't a bad park per se. But again, it was mobile home parks. It wasn't like this great, beautiful thing. So I was like, kind of confused why anybody would even want to buy it. But every few months there was a lot of interest, and the more I've been in real estate, the more I realized that mobile home parks are a very viable investment option and a very interesting to me. Maybe I'll someday have the old grandparents' mobile home park if I'm lucky. But anyway, somebody would come by and offer to buy it. and they would give a price, whatever that was. My grandpa would kind of sit around, think about it for a few days, and come back and deny them or give them a price so high that they no longer wanted to buy it. So never sold it. My grandma still owns it, which is great. And I was like, man, is my grandpa crazy? Does he think his stuff is worth more than everybody else? Probably, to be honest, as most sellers do, they think their stuff is worth more. But when I asked him that, he said, hey, listen, the price that they're offering me, while it may be a fair price, in 3 to 5 years, the cash flow that I would make off of these mobile homes would already pay me that back. So in 3 to 5 years, I'd have the money back that they would purchase it for, and then I will still have a money-making asset. So in this kind of extreme example, because if you look at what he owned, there were cheap mobile homes that were maybe worth 10 grand each, if even that, 15, 20 of them, whatever it was. The land itself was only 2 or 3 acres, and then he had utilities set up, of course, in spots, and so there was value there. But the added value altogether did not add up to him being willing to sell, but the cash flow was so high in relation to it. So again, just an example of how the appreciation would be really slow on something like that. Now the flip side of that, again, I don't have maybe a specific example, but is like what we spoke about, just like a really, really nice neighborhood in a nice town that is growing. You're going to have a ton of appreciation, but getting the renters in there and keeping everything up with the cost of the house is going to be tough, at least initially. Now, depending on how you refinance and this and that, those rental rates hopefully would catch up and you would start to cash flow more. So appreciation is a play that a lot of people make more for the long term, and cash flow not always is a play that people make kind of for the short term so they can be able to afford to buy other properties. Neither of them bad, obviously. Okay, so let's lay out some of the pros and cons of going for a higher cash flow or a higher appreciation play. And there is like a spectrum all in between. So I'm kind of like playing on each end, but you can kind of mix and match, and we'll talk more about that in a second. I'm going to be looking down at my computer so I can read my list so I don't forget one. So that's why I'm not making eye contact with you, not to be rude. So the pros of cash flow: money in your pocket each month from cash flow, obviously. Ability to leverage extra income to secure more debt to buy further homes, cheaper purchase price compared to the asset you're getting, possibility of using the income to replace your job if you're looking for that. The cons: has a propensity to have a lower quality renter that causes more headaches. Not always the case, but that can be. If the property is in poor condition, then traditional financing can be difficult to secure, more difficult to sell depending on the condition of the house and where it's at if it's not in a very desirable area. Less of a payout when you do sell, obviously, because of the lower appreciation rates throughout the time of ownership. Now you could always sell things at discount. Now for the appreciation play, some of the pros of that is a higher quality renter. Again, not always, hopefully. Great property that you would likely be proud to own. So, nice, pretty houses. Those are always fun to own. And, my grandpa owned a mobile home park, and I would say he was pretty proud of it. But in a lot of ways, who wouldn't be more proud to own like beautiful houses by the sea? Again, it's just kind of a pride thing there. Lower maintenance costs, not always, but can be if they're nicer, newer. Easy to sell when necessary. If you're in a desirable area, obviously, it's going to be more desirable to sell. Large payoff when sold or refinanced because of that appreciation. Now, some of the cons of the appreciation plays: little to no money in your pocket each month if you're really getting your cash flow hit. Some investors even take a loss on these, and again, they're playing the long game of appreciation. I don't really recommend this for beginners always to be losing money, but it depends on what you're going for in your investment strategy and where you are in your life. If you're using your loan and you're buying something that's nicer and more expensive, obviously it's going to hit your debt to income higher than buying a cheap house. So you may have a harder time getting a loan for it, or getting additional loans after the fact, especially if the cash flow is in the negative. It's going to hurt your debt to income on both sides, the debt and the income side. And then you won't be able to use the strategy easily to replace your job's income. Obviously, if that is your goal, you're going to need cash flow each month to make that a reality. And then it's more expensive purchase prices, usually in high appreciating areas, unless you catch it on before it starts the upswing, which is kind of like timing the stock market, which again, I don't really recommend because I don't know, it's hit or miss, we'll say at the least. But again, as a reminder on any of these are just like really general and kind of talking about either end of the spectrum. You can have a nice blend of either. So this brings the next question: how should you invest? In short, this one's really easy for me to answer: any way you want. but you're probably not looking for that answer. So let's break down some options and then you can kind of decide what fits your needs best. First, let's talk about what you want your preferred outcome to be. If you want in 30 years to have as much money as possible and you're not worried about taking any money out today, you're going to reinvest everything you have, appreciation plays may be the better way to go because those ones can get you the best gains. Again, I wouldn't recommend losing money, but you should at least break even or make a little bit. The way I heard one investor talk about it is if I make $100 on each unit, how many times can I do that over and over and over? And it's kind of true. Of course, we have to think about down payments and saving money. So you want to do the best you can on the cash flow side, but appreciation in most people's eyes, the bigger, nicer houses in the nicer areas tend to make more money in the long term, and the cash flow does eventually catch up in these appreciating markets because, again, rental rates and such are going to go up as well. But if you want to get out of your job and you want a high cash flow, a mobile home park is probably a pretty good idea. That mobile home park that was really, at the time, probably worth like $150,000, $175,000 was bringing in like $3,000 to $5,000 a year, and those are just off the top of my head. So I mean, there's a month that they owned outright. They didn't have any debt service or anything like that. So that may be a better play for you if you want to get out of your job. Again, the tenants and things, they may be a little bit tougher, but it's not the end of the world. I managed them for a little bit. And I don't know, they had a pretty nice park. I'm sure things get far worse than what I had to deal with. But if it's something you're willing to do, that's kind of knowing what outcome you want to look for. And then if you are kind of, again, a mix, which I think most people end up being kind of in the middle of the spectrum where they're like, hey, I need a little cash flow now to kind of supplement what I'm doing, and I want to be able to reinvest it and have enough for emergencies if something comes up. I don't want to completely rely on my income to have to pay for an investment home. You can look in your current market and kind of see what's available. So that's really the next step after kind of knowing your outcome. We'll just bleed right into that. Is knowing what your preferred outcome is knowing your market. So the market you're in currently, I generally push people towards investing in the market that they know and they have the connections in. Now, investing abroad is totally an option, but let's kind of talk about your market in particular. Usually, within like an hour drive of where you live, there is a good variety of cash flow options, appreciation options, and then mixes in between. So if you're looking for things that are at like one end of the spectrum that your market just does not have, that's when I would say you should start looking abroad and making a team. I don't want to get in all the details of how you would do that because it's a whole other video probably of doing the abroad investing. However, if you find that you do have something in your market, that's where you want to start. So me in particular, just give an example, Fairbanks, Alaska, we don't generally, besides the last like 3 years, we don't generally have like huge appreciation jumps. So cash flow is kind of the best for us. Right now, again, it's a little bit wonky with the past 3 years with COVID or whatever has caused all the things that are happening in the housing market. We've seen a ton of appreciation and our rental rates have kind of sloughed a little bit behind, although they've risen up quite a bit as well. But we're still what I would say a pretty good cash flow market, or maybe a little balanced right now. But I do think it's going to start turning back towards a heavier cash flow because I think the rental rates are going to continue to rise. While housing will also appreciate, I think it's going to be at a slower rate, especially than like 20% a year. So we're probably not going to see that. So again, if I was just wanting a full appreciation play, I would need to go somewhere else to do that. I personally don't want that, so it's not really a bad place to be. But anyways, kind of finding out your market, knowing what your outcome is, speaking with a real estate agent to kind of get some of that info if you don't already know it. All right, so if you want my opinion, you may not, you can just stop watching if you don't. But if you are a beginning investor, if you're asking the question, what should I invest in? I'm assuming you're probably in the beginning stages. But though sometimes that may not be the case. But for most beginning investors, I would choose kind of a middle of the road approach. So don't choose war zone neighborhoods that you could hopefully cash flow a ton and you can buy them suckers dirt cheap. I don't really think that's a great idea. I'd get maybe like A- to even like B- properties, which to me means, I think everybody has maybe a different rating, but to me means people that are not like, they're just middle class, basically. They're not super wealthy. They don't have these huge executive jobs. They're blue collar, they're tradespeople, whatever it may be. But they're good people, hardworking people. They generally are going to be more consistent. Like even, let's say at the very bottom end when you're like basically a war zone, people don't have any money, this and that, you're having to evict people, there's drugs, there's all kinds of crazy things that can happen. And then at the top end, I guess there could be drugs up there too, you know how movie stars are, but at the top end of income earners, you have big personalities that are maybe demanding, or they have jobs that, hey, if that job goes away, they're not gonna stay here, they're gonna move to another place where the job is, kind of deal. So they may be more transient. And then in economic pullbacks, a lot of those big time earners, they're not really expendable, I won't say, but they move around a lot more, or their positions get pushed around because they do cost so much. Where again is like the steady Freddies that are welding up on the slope in Alaska or wherever. A lot of times that's probably going to be needed. So that would be my goal, is to get in one of those neighborhoods. They would cash flow relatively well. The appreciation again would be moderate. But it's kind of not the beginning price range maybe, but just a hair above that, or even in the beginning price range where most of the buyers are at. Like for our market, that's around 250 to 350,000, or maybe even a little higher now these days. There's always going to be a lot of buyers there unless the town just becomes a ghost town. So down the road, appreciation will happen. If you need to sell, you can. So again, it's kind of a very middle of the road to get your feet wet and get yourself experience, and hopefully not have too many nightmare situations where you're staying full of tenants and having a little bit of cash flow coming into your pocket each month. So where do you go from here? Excuse me, if you decide you want to invest. The first two people are always your lender, unless you're buying cash, and your real estate agent. Me being a real estate agent, of course, come see me if you're in the Fairbanks area. But it's very important to kind of know the market you're in, and then have somebody who's experienced with investors to be able to help you out along the way, like help you run numbers, although you should run those on your own as well to confirm. But just kind of give you a general outlay, like, hey, these are the good neighborhoods, these are not great neighborhoods, especially if you're doing this abroad. You're going to be looking at much more uncertainty. So taking the time to find a agent that is good with investing. I would personally go to an agent first and also ask for a lender recommendation in the area. Here in particular, our local lenders make a world of difference because we have a very weird climate and very weird housing situation. And a lot of times out-of-state lenders, even if you have great experience with them, can be kind of a bummer. But yeah, that is pretty much it. I am about to go blind. I just want to let you guys know I'm using a ring light. I feel like a social media influencer now. I'm feeling very special. I'm probably going to be blind after this because it feels like I've been staring at the sun the whole time. But hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again when I see you.